Socrates did not change himself. The reason is he knew the truth. He also knew that people did not know the truth. The truth is inside the Pandora's box. And the truth lies deep in that box. People cannot go that deep. That is why Socrates wanted to change others as they should have changed themselves. As they could not find out the truth, they remained in the ignorance. Paradoxically, they remained immature and so they survived. Alas! Socrates could not survive. It was because Socrates' maturity was lying deep in the Pandora's box. It remained undiscovered. The bright side is that once the truth was discovered, it remains discovered forever. Realistically, the truth is anti-narcissistic. So is the maturity. Philosophically, the more you are mature, the more you are anti-narcissistic. And paradoxically, the mature will die under the immature. The immature people will kill the mature. It is because of the Darwinian evolutionary theory of survival of the fittest. The following biography has been taken from Wikipedia. All photos may not represent the story. Watch to learn English the way you've learned your mother tongue, as this video is especially made. Socrates was born in 470 BC. He died in 399 BC. He was a classical Greek, Athenian, philosopher. He was credited as one of the founders of Western philosophy. And as such, he was the first moral philosopher of the Western ethical tradition of thought. He was an enigmatic figure. He made no writings. As a result, he is known chiefly through the accounts of classical writers writing after his lifetime, particularly his students Plato and Xenophon. Other sources include the contemporaneous Antisthenes, Aristippus, and Aeschines of Phaedos. Aristophanes, a playwright, is the main contemporary author to have written plays mentioning Socrates during Socrates' lifetime, though a fragment of Ion of Chios travel journal provides important information about Socrates' youth. Plato's dialogues are among the most comprehensive accounts of Socrates to survive from antiquity, from which Socrates has become renowned for his contributions to the fields of ethics and epistemology. It is this Platonic Socrates who lends his name to the concepts of Socratic irony and the Socratic method, or elenchus. However, questions remain regarding the distinction between the real-life Socrates and Plato's portrayal of Socrates in his dialogues. Socrates exerted a strong influence on philosophers in later antiquity and in the modern era. Depictions of Socrates in art, literature and popular culture have made him one of the most widely known figures in the Western philosophical tradition. As Socrates did not write down any of his teachings, secondary sources provide the only information on his life and thought. The sometimes contradictory nature of these sources is known as the Socratic problem, or the Socratic question. Plato and Xenophon's dialogues provide the main source of information on Socrates' life and thought. These writings are the Socratikoi logoi, or Socratic dialogues, which consist of reports of conversations apparently involving Socrates. As for discovering the real-life Socrates, the difficulty is that ancient sources are mostly philosophical or dramatic texts, apart from Xenophon. There are no straightforward histories, contemporary with Socrates, that dealt with his own time and place. A corollary of this is that sources that do mention Socrates do not necessarily claim to be historically accurate, and are often partisan. For instance, those who prosecuted and convicted Socrates have left no testament. Historians therefore face the challenge of reconciling the various evidence from the extant texts in order to attempt an accurate and consistent account of Socrates' life and work. The result of such an effort is not necessarily realistic, even if consistent. Two factors emerge from all sources pertaining to the character of Socrates: that he was ugly, at least as an older man, and had a brilliant intellect. He lived entirely within ancient Athens, at least from his late 30s, and other than when serving on military campaigns in Potidaea, Delium, etc., he made no writings, at least not about philosophy. A single verse of poetry composed by him survives, and he was executed by being made to drink hemlock. Details about the life of Socrates are derived from both contemporary sources, and later ancient period sources. Of the contemporary sources, the greater extent of information is taken from the dialogues of Plato and Xenophon, both devotees of Socrates, and the testaments of Antisthenes, Aristippus, and Aeschines of Phaedos, and the lesser from the plays of Aristophanes. Later ancient period sources include Aristoxenus, Apollodorus of Athens, alive during the 2nd century BC, Cicero, alive 106 to 43 BC, and Diogenes Laertius, alive probably in the earlier half of the 3rd century AD. The sources are thought to have in part or wholly made use of the factual information of the life of Socrates available to each of them, to give their own interpretation of the nature of his teaching, giving rise to differing versions in each case. For example, in Aristophanes' play The Clouds, Socrates is made into a clown of sorts, particularly inclined toward sophistry, who teaches his students how to bamboozle their way out of debt. However, since most of Aristophanes' works function as parodies, it is presumed that his characterization in this play was also not literal. In Phaedo, which is the only attested source describing the death of Socrates, Plato is thought to have selected and omitted details to provide material for his argument for the existence of the liberation of the soul from the body, an argument he possessed from learning of the ideas of Pythagoras, born sometime after 606 and died sometime after 510 BC. The year of birth of Socrates stated is an assumed date, or estimate, given the fact of the dating of anything in ancient history in part being sometimes reliant on argument stemming from the inexact period florute of individuals. Diogenes Laertius stated Socrates' birth date was the 6th day of Thargelion, the day when the Athenians purify the city. Contemporaneous sources state he was born not very much later than sometime after the year 471. His date of birth is within the period of years ranging 470 to 469 BC, or within a range 469 to 468 BC, corresponding to the 4th year of the 77th Olympiad. Socrates was born in Alopeke, and belonged to the tribe Antiochis. His father was Sophroniskos, a sculptor, or stonemason. His mother was a midwife named Phaedo. In his 50s Socrates married Xanthippe, who is especially remembered for having an undesirable temperament. She bore for him 3 sons, Lamprocles, Sophroniskos and Menexenus, though Aristotle claimed that the latter 2 were his sons by another, presumably earlier, wife, Myrtu, daughter of Lysimachus, a close friend of Socrates' father, which means Myrtu is likely to have been roughly of Socrates' own age. Socrates is likely to have been trained as a stonemason, and there was a tradition in antiquity, not credited by modern scholarship, that Socrates crafted the statues of the chariots, which stood near the Acropolis until the 2nd century AD. Xenophon reports that because youths were not allowed to enter the agora, they used to gather in workshops surrounding it. Socrates frequented these shops in order to converse with the merchants. Most notable among them was Simon the shoemaker. Socrates' death is described at the end of Plato's Phaedo, although Plato was not himself present at the execution. As to the veracity of Plato's account, it seems possible he made choice of a number of certain factors, perhaps omitting others in the description of the death, as the Phaedo description does not describe progress of the action of the poison, Gill 1973, in concurrence with modern descriptions. Phaedo states, after drinking the poison, he was instructed to walk around until his legs felt numb. After he lay down, the man who administered the poison pinched his foot. Socrates could no longer feel his legs. The numbness slowly crept up his body until it reached his heart. Socrates chose to cover his face during the execution. According to Phaedo, Socrates stated that all of philosophy is training for death. Please subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.